Calaroga Shark Media.
Hello, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. A lot of Shane Gillis reactions, but first let me tell you about a Seattle comedy club that canceled 4 stand-up comedians. They are Dave Smith, Louis J. Gomez, Jim Florentine, and Kurt Metzger. They were canceled after angry community activists complained. According to the comedians involved, the shows were at the Capitol Hill Comedy Bar, and the version that we're being told is that left-wing community actives and progressive comics were offended. The comedians say they received an email from the club co-owner, who's also a stand-up comic, saying the gigs had to be canceled. The decision came after discussions with our team, investors, local comedians, and neighborhood advocacy groups. An email posted by Jim Florentine and Kurt Metzger says Capitol Hill is known for its progressive values, and we've received significant feedback expressing concerns about the alignment of these upcoming shows with the neighborhood's ethos. This feedback includes concerns from local advocacy groups that are deeply embedded for our community and work towards upholding its values. The goal is to avoid any potential negative impact on both our club and the artists involved, as well as to maintain the harmony within our community. Gomez on his podcast said, "Are they idiots for booking us and then unbooking us? Yes, it's a dumb move. Is my former agent an idiot for booking me at a super woke progressive venue like that? The entire lineup was like blue-haired freaks." That's what happens when comics don't have anything going on. They look for drama. So the owner found drama within the comedy space there, and she was like, all right, I think they're great, but I don't need to make it a thing. According to a report from KING5, the Capitol Hill Comedy Bar makes comics adhere to the Code of Conduct, which outlines expectations for respectful behavior and language, helping to create a welcoming space for both comics and guests. Podcaster Joshua Smith said, "Who needs comedy when Seattle is already a joke?" Okay. Comedian Toby Turner tweeted, "The community bought tickets. The people sabotaging it aren't really the community. What's going on over there?" Fox News' Tyrus said, "Friendly advice book in another venue close to the town. Sell it out and kill it. And in 3 months, when they tell you it's all good to come back, send them the same email." Juno Mann is a local comic and show producer who works with the club and hosts Funny Queer Asians. She said, "I have loved working with this club and am more resolute in doing so given their decision to prioritize the safety and inclusiveness of the local community." So I see an article from last May from King 5, Comedy Bar now open in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. According to that article, Capitol Hill Comedy Bar is dedicated to supporting the art and craft of stand-up comedy with integrity and professionalism. The staff believes that creating a safe, accessible, and respectful environment is of utmost importance. The goal is to provide a harassment-free environment, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body type, or race. All comics performing on stage must either adhere to the Code of Conduct, which outlines expectations for respectful behavior and language, helping to create a self and welcoming space for comics and guests. So, I can both sides this one. If the club wants to have a certain vibe and style and expectation, sure, go ahead. But why book these guys? These guys are known. They do a festival called Skankfest. I mean, did nobody do homework? How did they get booked? A lot of Shane Gillis reaction as expected. I, on Sunday night, watched the entire episode as opposed to just watching the individual clips. I thought it was an above-average episode for the last 2 years of Saturday Night Live. It didn't hit the heights of, say, the Nate Bargatze episode, but there have been far worse. The Ayo Edebiri episode was also pretty good. She was great. So I'll continue to say what I've been saying. I find Shane funny. I find him charismatic. I also think some of the points that I talked about during one of last week's podcasts about some of the guests he's had on the podcast, those are worrisome. Vox writes, "When Shane Gillis tells you who he is, believe him." In that article, they write, Shane Gillis is a 36-year-old guy from Pennsylvania who was chasing a fledgling stand-up career when he began making inroads in 2016 through the medium of comedy podcasting. This included a stint hosting a show called A Fair One for Compound Media, a podcast network created by Anthony Cumia, a notoriously offensive shock jock known for his own racist comments. Yeah, that's Anthony of Opie and Anthony. Some of his comments are so controversial. When I teach my college class in the fall, I spend 2.5 weeks just talking about Opie and Anthony, and these are now 20-year-old incidents. Ant plays on the side of the street that I don't want to play on. I was actually asked to run the Opie and Anthony channel, and I declined, and it probably didn't help my career at the old place, but I just didn't want to deal with any of that. I don't know if I've ever spoken to Anthony. I know Opie a little bit and found Opie to be a good guy. Fox writes, Compound Media also hosted Gavin McInnes, the white nationalist, who rallied other members of the network together to form the Proud Boys, the extremist group that played a major role in both the 2017 Charlottesville Unite the Right rally and the January 6th insurrection. Johnny Mac doesn't want to deal with any of that. Compound Media was the platform on which Gillis dropped the racist slurs that ultimately got him dropped from SNL. But it wasn't the only medium in which he aired his views. In his independent comedy work and other projects, he was not shy about voicing repugnant views. As one Philadelphia comedy club noted in 2019 in a since-deleted tweet, "We, like many, were very quickly disgusted by Shane Gillis's overt racism, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia, expressed both on offstage upon working with him years ago." Gillis's fans, including more liberal comedians like Gerard Carmichael, seem to believe that rather than being actually racist, Gillis is consciously cultivating his offensiveness purely for the purposes of his comedy work. Vox writes, "This view is as old as comedy itself, but in the current cultural era, it's evolved into what NPR's Eric Deakins has called bigotry denial syndrome. The thinking goes that a comedic project has a certain level of importance and purpose, the level of which should completely negate any suspicion that the comedian truly believes what they're performing, let alone that they deserve consequences for the offensive material. In Gillis's case, it seems more accurate to say that he's not performing ironic racism at all. He's coasting on other people's good faith belief that he must be acting totally in jest." In a 2016 interview with Gillis, he claimed to be running experiments on his audience. He said, "It's funny what people will laugh at compared to what they're so eager to prove that they're not laughing at." The conclusion we're left with is, with all that panic, as it so often does whenever someone is supposedly canceled, has subsided, likely to have dissipated in the wake of Gillis's continued success, Vulture put forth 2 reasons for hosting the gig and the timing. One, that perhaps Michaels is trying to remain apolitical during an election year and wants to do that by opening up a platform for comics who appeal to the right. And 2, that Lorne Michaels lives for the drama. Pointer had a good note, and they had me wondering what Dave Chappelle might have done, how Dave Chappelle might have addressed his own controversy. Pointer writes, "I saw Gillis's monologue as an opportunity badly missed. In what might be his only turn ever as host, Gillis would have smartly addressed his past controversy as well as his style of comedy." By the way, if you haven't heard the monologue, I played clips from it on Monday's podcast. Shane could have explained his point of view. He could have given his critics something to consider instead of letting them assume his comedy goes to the lowest common denominator. If Gillis is talented enough to actually have once been hired as an SNL cast member and funny enough to still end up being a host after being fired, shouldn't he be clever enough to come up with a monologue that weaves together his comedy and commentary about his comedy? That is an excellent point by Pointer. Gillis took the safe way out and delivered a moment that had no impact. The Hollywood Reporter writes, "Fortunately for Shane Gillis, the SNL writers know how to deploy a Gillis type, and he amiably played average white Joes in most of his sketches, including a contestant on the floor, desperately trying to convince others that he actually can identify famous black people, and as Forrest Gump's former bully who peaked in high school. I thought both sketches were good." Gillis played an Ohio Catholic dad who drags his family to church while vacationing in Jamaica. He catches the spirit. The whole sketch ends with a literal crossing of the aisle as the white tourist family jams alongside the Jamaican congregation. I also thought that was a funny sketch. Vulture wrote, "Shane Gillis got away with it, though he sometimes comes off as if Barstool Sports were a person." Not bad. What Gillis does best in his comedy is translate red state values and interests for a slightly broader audience. In his SNL monologue, though, he does the opposite, explaining at one point in the least offensive way you can muster what a dude himself thinks gay men are like. It's just filled with outdated cliches that have no business in an era of this show that tends to assume viewer familiarity with the modern landscape of sexuality and gender, and considering that his firing was partly due to homophobic content, performing this bit in this setting seems particularly unwise. It did not go over well, especially with the house band. So many articles about the young guitarist. She's probably getting a lot more attention than she wants. The Guardian says, "What's ironic about all this is how Gillis's actual comedy doesn't gel with either narrative. Certainly, his persona is that of a meat-headed conservative bro, but his material, for as edgelordy as it can be, more often than not, ridicules that demographic, and with far sharper accuracy than ostensibly left-leaning comedy, including and especially SNL. Anyone who's seen his recent Netflix special, Beautiful Dogs, and is being honest with themselves recognizes his talent. Even as his web series Gillian Keefe suggests, he's a mediocre sketch comedian at best. For as much heated online discourse as Gillis hosting begat over the past couple weeks, it's hard to imagine anyone feeling strongly about this episode one way or another. Gillis didn't exactly make a case for himself as any great missed opportunity, let alone the iconoclast as most ardent fans were expecting. In fact, writes The Guardian, his reluctance to address his firing made him look soft, especially when you compare it to the 1999 episode that Norm Macdonald hosted 1 year after his termination. But then, Gillis is no Norm. The Guardian marked the 30th anniversary of the death of Bill Hicks. This by Brian Logan, who wrote, 5 years ago, I spoke about Bill Hicks' legacy with comics who weren't even born when he plied his trade, and was startled to discover in how low a regard they held his work. Of course, I knew some of his material was out of step with the times. But the extent to which the entire manner, the whole Bill Hicks way of being as an outlaw comic, a teller of truth or power, and a mansplainer, was now, for many things, a thing hideous to behold. That caught me by surprise. I have always found within the industry Bill Hicks to be revered. Brian Logan writes, I push back against the debate, I still would now, but revisiting Hicks' material 30 years since he died, I see more clearly what they meant. If you're not familiar with Bill Hicks, basically Dennis Leary lifted Bill Hicks' entire persona, so that might be a way to shorthand it, but do yourself a favor and look up Bill Hicks on YouTube. This reminds me of back at Sirius before the merger. Comedy Intern number 5 loaded some albums by Bill Hicks, except there's another artist named Bill Hicks who did like smooth jazz guitar albums. So I'm listening to my channel one day and there's like Bill Hicks guitar on, and I'm like, did you not listen to the clip, stupid intern? Intern did not get a job at the end of the semester. Logan writes, I suppose that my tastes and standards, like anyone else's, can't help but be shaped by the changing world around me, and with each passing half-decade, I get a bit more distance from the teen comedy fan that held Hicks to be just about as good as comedy gets. We do more of that tomorrow. Getting a little long here. Donnell Rawlings has a new special out today. It is called Donnell Rawlings, A New Day. Actually, it's called Chappelle's Home Team, Donnell Rawlings, A New Day. You'll find this on Netflix. Dressed in a blue suit, red socks, and lotioned ankles, Donnell's here to discuss toxic relationships, traveling in New Zealand, aging, co-parenting, and much more. Kind of weird, right? That Donnell had all those controversies last week and was shouting at Corey Holcomb, and just a week later, he's got a new special on Netflix? Weird. A correction. On yesterday's podcast, I told you Tig Notaro's special is out. No, yesterday was February 26th. Tig Notaro's special is out on March 26th. Sorry if I ruined your Monday night. Amy Schumer has revealed she has been diagnosed with Cushing's syndrome, a relatively rare hormonal disorder that can change a person's facial appearance and cause weight gain. She spoke with the newsletter News Not Noise. Amy said there are a few types of Cushing. Some that can be fatal, require brain surgery or removal of adrenal glands. While I was doing press on camera for my Hulu show, I was also in MRI machines 4 hours at a time, having my veins shut down from the amount of blood drawn and thinking I might not be around to see my son grow up. So finding out I have this kind of Cushing that will just work itself out and I'm healthy was the greatest news imaginable. It's been a crazy couple weeks for me and my family. Aside from fears about my health, I also had to be on camera having the internet chime in. But thank God for that, because that's how I realized something was wrong. Just like when I had realized I'd named my son something that didn't sound so good, the internet is undefeated, as they say. The only thing I'd like to add is that this is a good example of the fact that we never know what's going on with someone. Everyone is struggling with something. Maybe we can all be a little kinder to each other and ourselves. Late Night with Seth Meyers turned 10 years old over the weekend. Seth said it took about 6 months for the show to find itself. He think a big change was when he stopped doing an opening monologue and just sat at the desk. He jokes, once people stopped seeing my legs, we turned a corner. Another change, he said, it seems so silly to wear a suit with no audience during the pandemic, so I was in casual clothes. Then when the audience came back, I just felt more in my own skin. Dressing more like myself allows me to be more like myself. I don't know if it's permanent, but it's a nice feeling. The other day I put on a suit for something else and it was like, ugh, I don't ever want to feel that way. Will he still be doing this job in 10 years? Seth says, I don't know. I've tried my career to never think that far ahead. I'd like to do it for a few more years. I can't imagine anything being more enjoyable than that. I'm coming up on 25 years at 30 Rock, and I'm pretty sure I'll get a watch or maybe a nice pen. I'll tell you this, if I don't make it to 25, there should be an investigation, because that means they just don't want to spend watch money. Conflicting reports. Donald Glover suggested that the Community film script was done, but Dan Harmon, who would know because he's writing it, tells Variety, it's almost done. Dan says, what can I tell you about it? It's set on the campus of Greendale Community College. I'm super excited about it, and we're almost done. And that is your comedy news for today. If you enjoy the program, let's tell more people about it. Share it on social media or tell your friend at the bar at trivia night. Be like, hey, I was listening to this podcast, and this guy's not that annoying. You should check it out. Something like that. Much appreciated. See you tomorrow.